I got 2 questions here in the Ask Me Anything to Dr. Bhrett. Okay, so ask Dr. Bhrett, what do we got here? Well, I get this one a lot. I'm a parent. I have a 13, 17-year-old kid, maybe sometimes younger, who's experiencing a lot of anxiety before they play. Doc, what do I do? That's a great question. You know, anxiety is a conceptualization. It's what we kind of consider our body and our mind ramping up, amping up to get ready for competition.
Recently, I was sitting in my office and meeting with an athlete who was playing for a very high-profile coach. And the concern was this coach is pretty much all over them in practice. Their demeanor, the way that they talk, seemed very loud, maybe even borderline aggressive. And the player came in and said, "Why does coach hate me so much?" And my answer was, having spoken to the coach, I knew that wasn't the case. The coach believed in this player's immense ability on the field and saw a very promising future, but felt very strongly that there were certain things the player was doing that if they didn't correct, they would not have the success that the coach envisioned for that player.
All right, so remember this. Pressure, the desire to play well when you're not knowing how you're going to play, ramps up your mind and your body, okay? So let's slow down our body by the way that we think, all right? So all that what ifs you can handle, all right? You know, who cares in the fact of, I want to play shots and I want to imagine it's like putting bonuses in a bucket, like, ooh, that was good. And so we can either look at the things that we're missing or try to get the things that we can get. And so if all we can control is our process, slowing that down. I don't want to slow down your body. I want to slow down your process in your mind. So take a deep breath, clear it up, and let's try to go gain some things. Kind of like you're at a carnival, right? It's like, ooh, I won that, I won this.
Hey, welcome everybody to Mental Game Live. This is our 3rd episode. 3rd! And I know it seems like we've been doing this for a while, or hopefully we've been doing it for a while, but tonight is a special night. One of the most common questions I get on my DMs, Ask Me Anything, is how to deal with the yips. And whatever sport you're playing, whether it's baseball and you're throwing yips or softball, free throw yips, can't serve in volleyball, can't tumble and can't get through a cheerleading practice or competition, or the dreaded ones in golf. It's all about the yips. So tonight we're going to dive in, and we're going to dive in deep, and we're going to get to the science behind it, and most importantly, how to solve it. But before we get there, just remember about Mental Game Live. This is a live interactive show, and I want your questions. You can post the questions on our YouTube channel in the comments, and Bash will grab them, and we're going to come back in segment number 4 tonight, and we're going to answer those questions. I'm going to do my best to be disciplined so I don't jump away around and answer a bunch of questions in the middle, because I want to dive into these things. But I need your feedback. I need you to share this. We need to talk about it. If you got somebody out there suffering or wants to improve the mental game and they don't know where to go, my goal is that Mental Game Live will be that resource, that we will have a place at least a couple times a month. I'm trying every week, but sometimes I'm on tour like I was last week, and it's hard to schedule a time where I know I can be there. But we're going to talk about what happened on tour last week, and really probably the weekend before. And so tonight we're going to dive in. We're going to be pulling some of the great stuff. Now, if you missed tonight, just know that every single show that we do is archived on my YouTube channel. So you've got to smash that subscribe button. Smash, smash, smash. That way you get notified when I'm live. And I know you're busy, so sometimes you forget that I'm there and you want to catch the archive. Well, they're all there. You can go back and watch them, and they're very, very valuable pieces of information. We have some unbelievable guests lined up in the future. We got some good people coming, and we're going to continue to grow and develop. So Bash will join me in a minute, but until then, let's do a review of what happened this past week in sports. So if you watched TPC Sawgrass, there's some unbelievable mental moments that happened. And those mental moments popped up because what makes that golf course so hard is that there is danger at every single element throughout that course. And then you added in the elements. And the PGA Tour moved that tournament from May to March specifically for what happened this weekend. The winds picked up. And it's a very challenging target-to-target course that looks tough. plays tougher. But then you look back at the end and you're like, what in the heck just happened? Right? Now, Scotty Scheffler runs away with it, and he's playing unbelievable golf, and he's reclaimed the number one spot in golf ahead of my guy, John Rahm. So why? What makes TPC Sawgrass so hard? Well, the beauty of that golf course, before we even get to 16, 17, and 18, is that golf course, designed by Pete Dye many, many years ago, focuses on different components and facets of the game. It forces you to have to play different shots. So, for instance, number one, you play a cut off the tee, and on number two, you have to hit a draw. Number three is a par three. Number four, you got to hit a cut, and if you miss the fairway, you're going to have to lay up because you're not going to carry the water in front of the green. Number five, another cut. Number six, a little bit of a draw. Number seven, every single shot throughout that golf course demands something different. It doesn't have any holes that look the same, act the same, and it puts each player on point. Now, the other thing that's great about it that I love is going when I'm on tour is I can see just about 2 or 3 holes at a time. You get on the back nine and you're standing near 11. You can watch the play on 10, 11, teeing off on 12, coming down 14, coming up 15. It's built for viewers and spectators. I love that because that's what golf needs. It's that stadium feel. And that's what we love about Augusta is that you can hear the roars throughout the trees on a Sunday afternoon. Well, that's what you get at TPC Sawgrass. But why it's so challenging mentally is that it demands something. And if you watch, as Scotty Scheffler was coming up the 18th hole, he blocked his drive way right on 18. And the reason for it was he couldn't go left. He had a big lead. And when he hit that approach shot, his third shot onto the green, he just let out just an exacerbated sigh. Whew. And I think a lot of times people look at a player playing with Scotty is, it's one of those things where people are like, playing like Scotty, and they look at that and they think he's playing great. In reality, he's having to battle. Bash, what do you love about that tournament? When you watch Sawgrass, what are you loving about it?
I think the biggest thing for me is just the overcoming, and I think you're going to talk about this, but just overcoming the fear on 17 when it's a normal, like you said before, a 135, 140 shot, but you're dealing with so many different elements. And just the water is just a massive danger in my mind, but those guys are so good that make it look easy.
And here's the other thing too, from a strategic standpoint, right? From a strategic standpoint, you're coming down 16 and it's a par 5 that's reachable in 2. You had a good drive and play, you're going to go. And it starts amping up the body and the adrenaline starts pumping. It's a 3 or a 4, let's go. And there's risk there, there's danger. But for the most part, if you make a mistake, you're going to make par, right? But then the next problem is, and the next challenge is, now you make your birdie, you pumping up, but as you're standing on that green, the players are looking over at 17. And I can tell you from my players, they will think about where that pin is from the day they get there. They're already thinking about 17. They're not ignoring the water. They're not ignoring that. And I hear that a lot of times in the middle game. It's like, act like nothing's there. It's no big deal. Are you kidding me? There's water and risk all over the place. You have to focus on the purpose of the shot you want to hit, not the prevention. And what they're good at is being able to say, I'll be over there in a minute. But now they're focusing on the things that matter. And they're focusing on the shot that they want to hit. Okay? They're focusing on what they want to do. If they make a mistake, now they go into the next stage. But we know once they're on that walk, it's about 150 steps to the 17th tee. They've got to slow down the heart rate because now it's not power, it's finesse. They're going to hit a wedge or a gap wedge, knowing that if they go long, they have to go to the top of the drop zone. If they miss it left or right, they're going to the drop zone. There's no dropping on the green. Okay? They have to go to the drop zone or re-tee. So now in their mind, a mistake is not just a 3. It may be a 5, 6, 7, or 8. It's catastrophic. And so as they're playing, those thoughts are starting to run. And you can see them when they hit a shot and it lands on the green, there's a sense of relief, like, whew, okay, averted danger today. They're just like you and me. They're just better at what they do and managing. Now, here's an interesting fact. I always find this interesting. When you go do the practice rounds on 17, and I spent a lot of time on that green, right? Nobody ever goes over to the practice area, the drop zone, and hits a shot. And one of the questions I always have is, why not? And players will tell me, well, I don't want to think about it. But if we're going to struggle, we got to know what's the risk. So it's something to think about. It's always purpose over prevention. And then you go off of 17, you feel relaxed, and you got.
All right, can you hear me back? We got me? All right, we're good. Sorry. Hey, some technology, the battery died. I replaced the batteries right before I went in. Sorry, Duracell, not very good. Sorry, guys. I'm glad you still got me. Anyway, we got to roll with it, right? So big mistakes happen, big money happens, right? And so those losses happen. And I know not one of those players wanted to do that, but you're talking major, major mistakes that cost millions of dollars. This is the biggest purse in PGA history. $25 million. The winner, Scotty Scheffler, won $4.5 million. 8 players won 7 digits, right? Why? What happens? Pressure builds. They're just trying to get into the house, and everybody faces. What I want you guys to understand is that players, even out on tour, are going through much of the same issues. It's hard. Every single player I work with has stress, fear, doubts, insecurities, everything. They're going through each and every bit of it. Okay? So what do we need to do? We need to work our process. We need to get in the spot and accept the fact that the big things are in there, okay? And the big elements are there. But most importantly, that they're trained for that. Here's the hard thing about all competition. I think we can learn from Sawgrass. In big competitions, we have to understand that the way we train is here, the way we compete normally is here, but then all of a sudden we go to those bigger moments and it gets more difficult. Noise picks up, doubts pick up, stress picks out, we don't move. Players will tell me they don't feel like they're turning as well. Pitchers in big games feel like they're overthrowing, all those things. And it happens to every single player. You who are struggling with it doesn't mean that you are different. It's just that they're better at dealing with those moments. Now let's talk about one other really cool thing. The World Baseball Classic is going on. And I know it's not like the World Cup in football or soccer, European football. But I have to laugh, right? If you haven't seen Great Britain's jersey, like, come on, Great Britain. You've been around a long time. You got to get a designer to help you. I mean, they just took plain old Microsoft Word font and put it and slapped it on a jersey. You can do better than that. But the World Baseball Classic is a lot of fun because it brings guys across to represent their country. And baseball's done that in amateur stuff, But the thing about it is, in the professional level, it's kind of new. I know we've done it a couple times. Players love to compete for their country. And as a result, enthusiasm is higher, the bonding is higher, and most importantly, they play harder. Now, we often look at professional sports and say, well, why can't we do that all the time? If you're a coach, you can find that. Get them to buy into a cause and a purpose. And most importantly, they will play to that level if they're bought in. You don't have to play for your flag to have that level of buy-in. But what's so cool about the World Baseball Classic, they're playing hard, they're having fun, they're goofing around, they're having a great time representing their country. We can do that every time we play. Stop being so hard on yourself and thinking it has to be perfect. When we come back, we're going to dive into the YIPS. All right, we're back. So let's talk about the YIPS. Now, let me take a step back. You ever had a moment where you were drinking coffee and all of a sudden you spilled it? It was hot, didn't feel good. You have this big stain that you're going to wear all day. And you're probably like, oh, man, I got a big presentation. It's stressful. I can't do this, whatever. Right? And you probably felt a little embarrassed. Like, I remember when I was in college, one of my most embarrassing moments ever. I was in college and I had taken an exam. It was biology. Big, large classroom at LSU, big amphitheater. And I always tried to take my test fast. My idea was if I was good and I knew the material, I could get done fast. Trust your instincts, go with it. And I'm in there and I'm taking the test and I get done and I'm like, I want to be done fast. Because the other way I looked at it is if you had an hour and a half class, you took a test in 30 minutes, you had an hour of free time. And I'm taking the test and I'm standing up. I'm looking at my Scantron and I'm stepping down, just making sure that all the bubbles are filled in. And I tripped on the desk in front of me. And I go falling on top of the poor people in front of me. Like, I'm not small, right? And here I go falling down right in the middle of a quiet test. And I was so embarrassed. And in fact, everybody kind of laughed and probably helped somebody cheat because I created a distraction. But the truth of the matter was, I kind of worried the next time I went back in there, everyone's going to go, oh, that's the dude, that's the doofus that fell down the steps. Okay. And so embarrassment played. Well, if you think about sports, we compete on a regular basis. We do everything we can to compete at our best. And there are times that sometimes we make a fool of ourselves. But there's nothing more embarrassing than the yips. We can choke under pressure. We can struggle when it's at its biggest moments. But at the end of the day, when we choke and we make a fool of ourselves because it's something simple, God almighty, is it bad. And we first really started studying it or like thinking about it about 40 years ago. There was a second baseman for the Los Angeles Dodgers by the name of Steve Sax. Steve Sax, he wasn't the first, okay? But he was one of the most prominent. He was a second baseman for the Los Angeles Dodgers. And he had Hollywood looks, right? Hollywood looks. And he just had everything going on. And at that time, the Dodgers were winning. And all of a sudden, he started struggling to throw the ball from second base in his position to first base. Like, I'm not talking like struggling like first base was moving. I'm talking like bouncing balls, sailing them into the stands. And, you know, crowds and opponents would jeer and they'd, funny, right? The reality was his neurological system was hijacking itself. And that's what happens. Okay, so recently, as you know, many of you found me because of Fixin' Frankie. I was fortunate enough to bring in Frankie from Barstool and Foreplay because he texted me and said, dude, I can't chip at all. I can't chip. I'm blading shots, I'm chunking shots, and it's so embarrassing. And so I was like, look, I guarantee you I can fix you. Because I've had a lot of success working with people who have blocks, they have yips, and they just can't get it done. And so it was a really cool experience because it's really not that hard. So Bash, as a catcher, did you ever have throwing yips?
I never had throwing yips, but
You scared of them? Were you scared of them?
Absolutely, because so the thing that I hope you're going to answer, and this is why I'm so interested in this, but from a YIPS standpoint, and just because I played the position at a major college level and the professional level, the issues that I've seen with the yips are the from a catching standpoint, throws back to the pitcher,
which you should be able to make in your sleep.
throws.
Yeah, you should be able to make
the
that
easiest throws. But you asked me to throw a laser beam to second base, there's no problem.
Correct.
And there could be a lot of different components. So I'm really interested in hearing what you had to say on that, because from a novice who doesn't know anything about it, like, I cannot wrap my head around it.
Right. And what happens for you guys to know? I'm gonna go through some graphics here in a minute. It's gonna take you through it. But what happens is a player just all of a sudden forgets the easy things. Nobody ever gets the yips on the hard things. They only get the yips on the difficult things. Okay? Or excuse me, on the easy things. Like the throws from a catcher to first base, catcher to pitcher, second base to first base, chipping around the green, short putts. I've had a few with driver yips, blocks on a round off back handspring, tuck. People all of a sudden balk, and it's the same pathology. So, Bash, are we going to go to the graphics now, or is there a video?
Yeah.
Is there a video that we had? We're going to do that in a minute. Oh, jumping ahead here. Okay.
Pull up graphics.
Yep, pulling up graphics. Here we go. Graphics coming up. Let me tell you what happens. Okay, here they come. All right, here's what happens. Okay, so everybody I've ever worked with in the yips, they've gone along just fine for a period of time. But more than likely, they've had an underlying mechanical flaw that has never come up to the surface. They're jumping along. They're bouncing along. They're chipping. They got a funky grip. They play it weird. They make it work. Okay, a second baseman gets up and they kind of chunk it over to the first baseman, and they're fine. But they've got a little mechanical flaw, and they've been able to play with absolutely no issues until, boom, something happens. They get under an increased pressure. Something happens with stress and what I call the catastrophic event. There's a moment where all of a sudden they go to throw it, and they, short arm it, the ball bounces, and their own teammate starts laughing at them. Ah, ha, ha, ha. So funny. I had a golf pro tell me, PGA teaching professional, really good player. He's like, Doc, I don't play golf anymore. And I said, what was the event? He's like, nah, there wasn't an event. I said, bull, what was the event? And he says, well, all right, there was an event. He said, I was coming down the stretch. I was playing in a pro member. I had a buddy of mine that I was playing with. We have a lot of fun playing together. He's the member. I'm the pro. We're coming along. And I go to hit a chip in front of the big amphitheater of all the players standing around, drinking beer, watching everybody come in. And they would jeer at you and yell at you. And it was fun, right? Until I flubbed a chip. He said, I was right in front of the green. It was an easy chip. I just flubbed it. Ball went that far. And all of a sudden, everybody starts yelling and screaming at me. Ah, ha, ha, ha. And they're like, you suck, you whatever. And he said, normally it wouldn't have bothered me. But that catastrophic event, all of a sudden, he said, within seconds, I felt the pressure. It's like, oh my God. He goes, I couldn't even feel my hands. My heart was pounding and my head was racing. I said, how did you hit the next chip? He said, I walked over to it. I just hit it real quick. I said, you hit a good one? He goes, hell no, I bladed it over the green. And I said, what, you had to hit another chip? He said, yeah, now I have to walk up there while everybody's yelling at me and laughing at me. I had to walk on the other side of the green and hit another chip. And all I wanted to do was to be done, to get it over with. And if you remember, I think we have a video that's going to come up in a little bit to show some of them. But there was a very famous scene of Ernie Els at the first hole at the Masters. On the very first hole of the tournament, he gets up there and he starts hitting putts. And you could just see him moving faster and faster and faster. And it's like the mind goes into panic. You get this increased arousal, increased mental energy. And all of a sudden, it's painful. Now, I want you to understand it like this. I treat this, I try to look at this way. You have an alarm system in your house, okay? And in that alarm system, you're hanging out middle of the night, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, your alarm goes off. Wah, 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 louder than hell, right? And all of a sudden, you get up, and the first thing you think is, holy crud, something's wrong. Something's the matter, right? Now, in that moment, what is your mind thinking? Is your mind thinking, man, maybe a bird hit the window? Well, a bird doesn't really fly at 2 o'clock in the morning. Maybe the moisture changed the seal of the window. No, in the middle of the night, all of a sudden you think, threat, 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 right? Somebody's breaking in. Now, imagine if you had been in an environment where there had been break-ins and there had been people breaking in at the middle of the night. Now, that alarm going off is telling you there is a problem. It ain't telling you that there's something else going on. 100%, you've got to be in fight or flight response, surge of adrenaline, get ready to fight. We're going to go find the burglar. We're going to protect our house. Is that what the alarm told you? The alarm told you that there was an intruder coming to take and do bad things to you and your family, right? That's what the alarm is saying. Nope. What the alarm is actually saying is there's a disconnect between the sensors. The alarm is alerting you to a potential threat, not a real one. But the discomfort that we feel there is bad. And that's why people have like a panic attack. When we have panic attacks, we have this pain in our chest, heart races, we think we're having a heart attack. It's a false alarm that looks real. Well, now our mind starts going, uh-oh, if this happens again, I don't know if I can handle it. Well, in the YIPS, the driving factor is not only loss of control, not only fear of that happening, is people are going to think I'm an idiot. People are going to think I suck. And then I love the fact about the YIPS. Throwing. I know Alan Jager's on here. He's a master in the mental game in baseball. And I know he's heard this a zillion times too. Hey, as a thrower, make sure you accelerate through the throw. Looks like you're kind of guiding it. Like, snap that wrist. Make sure you get a good turn. Now the player gets over it, and their mind is going wild on mechanical thoughts. They're very internal, right? And the YIPS start developing because that embarrassment is there. Let's go to the next slide, Bash. And now we start fearing that they're going to happen again. They start building, the tension rises. And now there's a new challenge. And it's amazing. We used to say in baseball that the ball always finds fear at the end of a game. Got a shortstop that's a little concerned with throwing, fielding ground balls, all of a sudden it's a bad hop. Every single time, right? The ball doesn't find confidence, it finds fear. Well, if you've got chipping yips or putting yips, well, don't leave it 3.5 feet short. Guaranteed to leave it 4 feet short. 100%. Now you're going to have to face it. And what happens is that false alarm starts telling stories again. Embarrassment rises. You get unbelievable tension. Your mind is going a mile a minute. And you have this increased focus on your mechanics. In putting, one of the things I spent some time with Brad Faxon, one of the best putters to ever play on the PGA Tour. And I was working with a player at the YIPS. And he said, in putting, those of you who've had putting yips, I'm going to jump between a few things, is that people take the club back and everybody goes, looks like you decelled on it. So they all of a sudden accelerate through the putt, which looks like a yip. Chipping, looks like you dumped it, you stopped. So now they go real fast. So their transition is boom, really quick. Throwing, you got to turn and throw and accelerate through it, and the ball goes right into the ground or sails at 100 miles an hour over the first baseman's head. Or the catcher, got to turn. Catchers stand up. They got all that gear on. They just usually throw it back. Now all of a sudden, teach them turn, step, throw. It's hard to do, okay? And what happens? You got the opposing team in the other dugout yelling at you and laughing at you. You got your friends. Well, guess what, y'all? I had the chipping yips, 100%. I used to avoid playing golf. I had some bad technique, but I'm a good athlete. And next, I'd taken all the lessons. I'd get up over the ball. I'd work it and everything. And I would flub the chip. And then I'd be like, screw it. And I'd hit the next one fine. But I could guarantee, because I had unbelievable focus on my mechanics and I had completely lost targeting. And you know what I did? I'd hurry up and hit before the next player showed up. The yips are just like panic attacks. Just like them. You get this sudden surge of what if rolling within you, telling you how bad you're going to be, and instead of focusing on what to do, like instead of focusing on I want to land the ball there, I want to throw it to the chest of the first baseman, I want to shoot my free throw to the back of the rim. We're focused on the how, not the where. And it takes us over. I've had unbelievable success helping people deal with it. There's a really good story in ESPN magazine about Tyler Matzik, who was the pitcher for the Atlanta Braves who overcame the yips by the help of a former Navy SEAL, Jason Kuhn, out of Stonewall Solutions up in Nashville. And he talked about increased tension. He said everybody's trying to release tension, but he looked at it as somebody who'd had the yips throwing himself on how to use trigger. And it was the slow increase of tension versus the all or nothing. And I loved that. And I'm going to show you how to overcome those in just a minute. But what I want you to understand about the yips, fear of embarrassment, number one, sudden surge of arousal, focus on the wrong things, and you are powerless to them. In just a minute, we're going to come back and I'm going to show you how to break the yips.
No way, the double. Double hit. It's a double hit. No way, team.
The old chili dip.
You just airdropped one. Oh my gosh, that was sick.
That ball got hit 3 times, 2 by the club and 1 by the divot.
That was so cool. New rules, that's only one.
All right, we got Borelli, Frankie Butter Nice.
Of course, the only time the video comes out is when I have this thing in my hands. Striking the ball. This is just mean, Rick.
He's short-sided. He's got a little hill to negotiate. It's incredibly wet. I mean, people at home are saying no chance.
No chance.
Am I in flight?
Yes. Watch out.
Fuck you!
All right. Now we're going to look at some, up here, some baseball ones that I think are great. Top 10 yips ever. Okay, this is Kevin Na, if you haven't seen it. Brilliant. More coming. Hang with me. Coming right back here. Coming right back. Got to check these out on YouTube. I'm telling you, they're good. They're good.
That's what I was talking about from a catching standpoint.
Absolutely. Isn't that great?
Like it's like triple pumping to the pitcher, and
Correct.
then just
It's awesome.
oh, that is just so sad. I actually read today that Rube Baker from Major League Two, Mackie Sasser was the inspiration for that. I don't know if you
That's
knew that or
good.
not.
Oh, yeah. All right, we can bring this up. I want to see Barkley now. Okay. Let's get back after it here. Here we go. So we were just talking about this. If you watch those videos, I think one thing I want you to watch is the facial expressions. Steven Adams shooting the free throw, in that game, and just his facial expression. Chuck Knobloch, just painful, right? The yips, man. I'm telling you, it's embarrassment. And what's so crazy? It's just like watching Mackie Sasser double pump that and throw that back. The opponent's able to take third base like nothing. Okay, it's a liability. And a little fun fact: Mackie Sasser, I believe, was supposed to come to LSU before he signed pro. So how do we break them? You got to remember the first thing is that your embarrassment is natural. We all get embarrassed when we're in situations, but what happens is we start using a lot more should statements. I shouldn't struggle with this. I'm better than that. I've got to be better than this, stuff like that. And the reality is those should statements are just nothing more than just kicks in your shins about you. Okay? You have to understand that, number one, mechanical flaws are not 100% to blame. You've had a mechanical flaw for a while. And as John Dunnigan said on here, who's a top golf instructor, he said, sometimes they're not the yips. Sometimes they're just terrible mechanical, shitty technique. And he's right. But a lot of us have shitty technique for a long time until it goes bad. And that embarrassment matches. It's kind of like the old case of panic attacks was an overworking type A personality that all of a sudden had chest pain and thinks they're having a heart attack because they're working 100-hour weeks. Okay. You didn't have to have a type A personality to have a panic attack, but boy, it sure did contribute to it. Mechanical flaws are not 100% to blame because you've been playing with those mechanical flaws for some time. It's just that when the right scenario hit and that pressure hit, now all of a sudden you've lost your trust and faith in what you were doing and the freedom by which you played. So it's not always about fixing technique. Okay. Mechanical is 100% true, but as coaches, a lot of times we jump in and we flood the player with overwhelming mechanical corrections. And it's not so much about what they're doing wrong and how to fix it. More likely it's that their mind is being overtaken by the mechanical steps. You have to, number two, dissociate yourself from the feels. I'm going to give you a little hint. I have my players name it. Bob is here. That sudden surge of adrenaline is Bob, or whatever they want to name it. And I had a player on tour who had the driver yips. And he texted me and he said, this week, I'm going to go with this name. And he texted me about 2 days later and said, you're not going to believe it. I named it this guy because I can't stand this guy on tour. And guess who I'm paired with for the first 36 holes? That dude. And he said, we got up on about the 6th or 7th hole and he had the driver yips. He had the feeling Bob was showing up, right? His version. And he said, I turned to my caddy and I said, Bob is here. And the caddy goes, yeah, no kidding. He's on the tee box. And he said, no, dude, like the Bob is here, using the other player's name. And the caddy went, oh, okay. All right. And we had developed a plan for when Bob shows up. See, what happens is in the yips, we're so preventative to hope they're never going to happen that they end up coming in harder. And if you ask people who have panic attacks, me, okay, that do you fear the next one from happening? Hell yeah, I do. So you spend a lot of time afraid of what's going to happen versus having a plan when it is going to happen. Those of you know me, have read my stuff. I'm finishing a book on anxiety. I had panic attacks when I was in grad school related to vomiting. And I was on an airplane and I got sick. And because of some healthy eating during 1 year, I had 3 cases of food poisoning, all from healthy food. I swear to you, I've never gotten food poisoning from chicken fingers or chicken wings. Every time I've gotten food poisoning, I've gotten it from good food that I should have eaten, that I was supposed to eat. It's crap. Anyway, but we were flying to Hawaii over Christmas, just after Christmas, now New Year's Day. And I felt so sick to my stomach. And Bob was here, Bob the vomit dude. And my wife, we'd gotten our meal. I'm like, you got to take my meal. Like, I can't even do it. Like, I was sweating.
And instead of resisting it, I just kind of said, hey, Bob's here. I can deal with it. I can face it. If I have to get up and go vomit, I'll deal with it. See, I developed a plan. And the plan wasn't resisting the internal feels. It was understanding that Bob was here and he's going to make my mind go into elevated mode. Instead, I was going to redirect it by what were my safeguards? What could I do? One of the things that I did with Frankie was exactly this point. If you watch in that video, when somebody walked up to him, he would automatically apologize for how much he sucked. Like, oh my God, I got this club in my hand. And he would make fun of it as a way to protect himself. Everybody does that who has the yips. Like, guys, don't look. You don't want to see this disaster. Or a person will throw and they're all throwing from prevention and they're protecting. And so one of the things that I always want people to understand is don't push Bob away. Instead, bring Bob in and go, Bob, I knew you were coming. I got a game plan for you. I know what I'm doing. Okay? I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to accept it. My man, Alan Jager, teaches meditation. I'm going to take a couple breaths and I'm not going to fight it. And I'm not going to be in a hurry to F up. Instead, I'm going to sit in Bob. I know you're here. And you know what? If I screw up, I screw up. But I'm going to screw up with intention and purpose, not prevention. I'm going to hit the best shot I can. I'm going to make the best throw I can. And if it's bad, so what? It's one closer to being better. And I'm going to learn how to do it. And then I'm going to go through my process, and I'm not going to be in a hurry to F up. I'm not going to be in a hurry to get rid of Bob. And I'm going to stand behind, and I'm going to find the shot I want to hit. Now, I may use a club that's more comfortable. I may make a throw that's more comfortable or something like that, because I've learned that when Bob shows up, I have to have an approach. I had a player on the PGA Tour who had short putting yips. And whenever his Bob would show up, he'd look to his caddy and he'd ask for the towel. And the caddy would walk over and give him a towel. And he'd go into his eye and be like, oh, man, I got something in my eyes. Like, oh, man, that's terrible. And then he would, wipe it off, and he'd come back and his caddy would say, we good now? He's like, oh, yeah, I'm good. Got over the yips like that. Because instead of fighting it and going faster to get out of it, he sat in it. Because I don't want you to ignore the feels. I want you to dissociate from them, accept them, and then work around them. And I want you to have an external process. So, for instance, when somebody's got the chipping yips, they're so caught up in their technique. The thrower's so caught up in where their hand is or what their elbow's doing that they're not actually thinking of a target. So for throwers, I have them make a 10-point and 5-point, 25 points and 10 points. They hit the head, it's 25 points. They hit the chest, it's 10 points. Becomes a target. Chipping, what I do is I have them focus on a landing spot, but they're not in a hurry to screw up. I have them slow their process down, focused on where they want it to land until they're ready. And what happens is Bob comes in real loud and then slowly backs away. Happens every time. That's why we sit in it. And last, we see that it's growth. Now, how I have the chipping yips, what I did was I took, and this is not a product placement thing. Orange Whip doesn't pay me. I'm not sponsored by them. They should sponsor me, but they don't. Orange Whip, you should. But I used the Orange Whip wedge trainer to fix my yips. And you know how I did it? I'd gone to every instructor. It's one of the cool things I get to do. I get to be with some of the best instructors in the world. And they don't give me great advice. But what I did is I took that Orange Whip. And for those of you who don't know, it's a wedge at the end of a floppy shaft. And if you have bad technique, you can't do it. And what I did is I went out, and it was about this time, about 5-6 years ago. I took a bunch of balls and I went out to wet grass. And I just said, I'm going to figure this out. And what I did is I played with it. I changed my grip. I changed my stance. I did all that. And all of a sudden, I started hitting good chips my way. And if you watch me hit chips, I dropped my left foot back. I played off my right foot. I choked down. I neutralized my grip. I put about that much space between the club and the ball, and I can do it. And I will chip with anybody. I'll even chip with my tour players now. Well, what do I teach my throwers? As catchers, Bash, this is one thing I teach them. Now, let me ask you this. Every one of us, a catcher, is a frustrated pitcher. Is that fair?
No.
No. Okay. But I teach every one of you to throw a slider back to the pitcher. Now, why do you think I do that?
Is that rhetorical, or are you asking?
I'm asking you. Why do you think I would, with a catcher with throwing yips, why do you think I would teach him to throw a slider back to the pitcher?
Because I'm not focused on I'm not focused on throwing it 25 feet back to the pitcher.
Correct.
I'm
To throw a
focused now. I'm
slider,
focused on the slider.
you got to pick. If you're going to hit me right here, you got to pick a spot right over here that's going to break off of that. It's an external target. And I just tell my catchers to tell the pitchers, I'm going to throw you cut fastballs or sliders coming back to you. Just be ready, okay? Oh, and by the way, tell the second baseman and the shortstop to be on their toes. Like, I don't care, but I'm going to throw sliders back or cut fastballs because it's intentional, not prevention. So a lot of times what happens in short putts, another one, people get in over the ball, and right now their mind is going a mile a minute, trying not for something bad to happen. And all of a sudden, they just want to hurry up. And I tell them, you're going to miss it anyways, so let's put the best, consistent, intentional stroke on it as we can. And guess what? The next question people ask after they start busting it, this is done, right? No. Bob's always in your life. And Bob will always be there, but have a plan when it gets there. You may be suffering from the yips. We're going to be doing some additional videos and segments out on the golf course, filmed to show you how to fix it. But you've got the blueprint right now to get started. Week up back, I'm going to be answering your questions that you've dropped us here.
Preston. He said, Bhrett, I had my catastrophic event and the discus event last weekend. Embarrassing throw went backwards. I haven't been able to build my confidence. How do I fix? Do you think I should give up discus?
Okay. First of all, you're not the first. I had a hammer thrower that threw it into the back net. And his whole concern was, my God, if I had gotten through that net, I would have killed people in the stands. Okay. So, for those of us that don't follow discus or hammer throw, these individuals are spinning extremely fast around a spot, and then they're having to launch it based on blind trust. And there's a little bit of break in there, and all of a sudden it stops. So here's what I would tell you to do, Preston. I'd get back to practice, and we're going to break it down into elements, okay? We're going to break it down into the spin. We're going to break it down into the release, and we're going to break it down into the freedom, okay? You're being caught up more than likely on the fear of it happening again. If it happens again, what will you do? You own it. I don't want you to walk away from a chance and what you've done because you're afraid of what could happen. You're not focusing on what can happen. And what can happen is you can throw perfect. Okay. You got to accept the fact, as Alan just said, you got to accept the fact that it could happen. But now we're going to focus on what do you want to do? You're not out there competing to avoid throwing it behind you. I want you to face the fact that Bob will show up, or whatever you want to call it. Your Bob will show up. And when he does, you say, okay, take a deep breath. It could happen. But you know what? I'm going to spin violently, and I'm going to release it and let it throw as far as I can. And I know your brain's going to go, I hope it comes off right. Whether it does or it doesn't, I want you to own the quality of the spin, not the quality of the release. Don't give up discus. Fight through this. You're not the first. You won't be the last, and you can overcome this. Bob's an ass, okay? He's going to tell you everything is about it. But there comes a point that you can overcome this. Focus on the spin, focus on the quality of it, and let it rip, okay? Let me know how it goes.
Are there any populations or personalities that are more susceptible to the yips? This is from a question on Instagram we got earlier in the week. Thought it was good, so I threw it in there.
Yeah, I love that question. There was a study that was done from Ainsley Smith at the Mayo Clinic many years ago, and they brought up this idea about focal dystonia, this sudden involuntary movement of the hands, as if people had a neurological condition. And I'm not going to say the study was a landmark study. It got a lot of attention. And I had people come to see me all the time saying, oh my God, I got a neurological condition called the yips. And I was like, can we ever look at it as that maybe the yips are a neurological presence, but maybe not a condition? I think people who are high performers, high perfectionists, high anxiety traits tend to have a higher chance of the yips. It's kind of like panic attacks. People who tend to be running a little hotter, talking about doing some things like that, have a little bit more stress, worried about mechanics, more apt to jump in on the mechanical side, are probably at increased risk. But just like panic attacks, it can happen to anybody. The thing that we have to be aware of is what gives us a higher rate of it is that fear of embarrassment or that out of control coming out of the blue thing. Okay, that out of the blue that pops in, that we feel that we don't have a plan to navigate it. That's the thing that pushes through. So I think it's more of a psychological side that you don't have a process. Okay, we got to develop a process when it happens. Get in after it. Okay, next question.
This one is from Sam on YouTube. Sam says, I'm a redshirt freshman pitcher. I got hurt last year and I'm coming back from injury. I've been dealing with the yips only when a batter is in the box. So kind of a statement / question there for you.
Okay. Well, as a former redshirt freshman and then as somebody who got injured, I get it, right? I lost my throwing mechanics after I had a shoulder injury. And the problem was every time I went in the bullpen, somebody would say, hey, have you thought about doing this? Hey, it looks like you're doing this. And all those other things that pop in there. Okay. And now every time I pitched, people would give me feedback on that. Let's boil it down. When somebody steps in the box, what changes? The freedom reduces. The outcome becomes more. Consequences become higher. And so you tend to try to over control. Let me ask you a question. And you can't answer this here, but I want you to think about it. What is your trigger? What is the key that unlocks you mechanically? Okay. We know that stress is going to be higher when a hitter steps in the box. We know that people are going to be there. We know that that's going to cause you to squeeze in on that strike zone a little bit. Okay. One of the things that we did at LSU, and I'll just use this as an example from pitching, is we pitched to the right knee of the catcher. Bash, did you guys do that at Ole Miss? The reach across the.
Yeah, we called it something different, but same concept. Yeah.
What did y'all call it?
You got to exchange your shoulders.
Yes. Okay. Now, why is that brilliant? Okay. It wasn't like you're doing something wrong mechanically. It was an intentional process that it forced you to do something that tended to eliminate the mistake. Okay. It's not about like, hey, throw it hard and let it rip. Okay. I never understood that one. I've also never understood. Just go out there and have fun. Shit, this is hard. This ain't fun. This is hard. Okay. So when you see a hitter, one of the things to look at is find me a target point. And one of the things I used to do, and I found when I came back, is I would focus on the left elbow of the opposing hitter if they're a righty. And if they're a lefty, I focused on the left shoulder of my catcher. And I focused on that, and I threw through that spot. That is something that I found that helped. Find the right shoulder, find the left elbow, something that gives you an anchor to drive through. I'd be interested to see what Alan would have to say on that. What's next?
This is one from Dan. I think this is like a little comment before, but then we'll get to the question. He said, I didn't have my first panic attack until I was 43. Thought I knew what it was like until it actually happened.
Yeah, I had a professor in grad school said, don't ever judge a panic attack until you've been in the throes of one. They suck.
100%. But Dan said, is there a point when the yips become more that it goes beyond a hiccup and becomes more of a larger issue?
Well, when it becomes your identity, when it becomes the player's identity. And if you watch somebody with the yips, how many people come rallying to them? I've seen it with field goal kickers. I've seen it with free throw shooters, everything. Okay. And it becomes the identity because everybody wants to talk about it. The best way to say it is, I've got a plan, I'm working it, and I'm stacking reps. And eventually you're going to be in clear skies. But Bob is always hiding there. So don't be afraid of Bob. Instead, realize that Bob is only there when you're close to the outcome that you want.
This one is from Teresa on YouTube. My daughter is a competitive junior golfer. What suggestions do you have for her to keep her focused on her own game when in a string of tournaments where she wasn't playing her best?
Okay, so it's not much different than the yips when somebody tends to get distracted. Because here's the deal. You can't control thought at all. Your mind will wander. We'll get caught up on different distractions. There are different things that are there. But what we have to do is we have to look at it, accept it, and pivot. Change the station.
Just like if there's a song, like, look, if there's a Nickelback song that comes on the radio, I'm going to turn the channel. I don't yell at it and go, I cannot believe it's there. Okay, I'm just going to turn the station. Okay. So what you do is you do the same thing. They're paying attention, whatever. Now I'm going to focus back. We can have an amazing conversation at a coffee shop. And we'll have time where our attention breaks, and then we'll come back to it. Teach her how to funnel in and funnel out. My first episode was on the funnel of focus, so make sure you check that out in my archives.
This one was from Double J on YouTube. Can you share your step-by-step process for someone with the yips and chipping on the routine, and when Bob shows up, how you build that process in?
Okay, Double J. So first thing I would tell you, more than anything else, go get you an Orange Whip wedge trainer. I don't make any money on it. I don't do anything with it. It was brilliant. And then what I want you to do is I want you to take about 50 balls, and I want you to put a spot on the green, and I want you to try to figure out how to get that club to deliver that ball to that target. And I want you to tell me later and send me a message that you figured it out. For me, I choked down, I neutralized my grip, I played it off my back foot, I put a little space between the ball and the club, and I'll chip with anybody. Seriously, I'll chip with anybody, okay? And I found my way. See, that's the thing about Bob. Bob wants to poke holes in everything that you do, and you ignore what you're capable of doing. I wanted to come up with a plan that I knew I could trust. So for me, when I get in that situation, Bob shows up. It's not mechanics. It's setup for me. I get set up. I like what it is. I take a deep breath. I look at my target, and I'm like, I give myself some positive intention and self-talk. I'm pretty good at this. Watch this. A couple of months after I got over the yips, one of my dear friends, Mark Blackburn, top instructor on the PGA Tours, teaches like everybody who's winning right now. Guy's making a fortune. But we were playing in a money match, and he and I like to talk a lot of garbage at each other. And he's got that British humor. I mean, just remember, he had highlights and a pierced ears, so he can't talk that much garbage. And so one of the things that you know, I hit this shot, and I'm short of the green. I'm in an uphill lie in tight Bermuda. And he walks up and goes, this will be good. I'll win this hole. And I can feel Bob show up. And all of a sudden, I'm like, whew. Okay. And I took a step back, and I said, you're good at this stuff. Go through your process and execute. What's the worst that can happen? You hit a bad chip, but do it with intention instead of prevention. Took a deep breath, stepped in, and I stiffed it to about an inch. And that was such a win for me, because instead of trying to rush, I almost hit before he got up there so I could get out of the way. And I said, no way, I'm going to sit in it. Double J, that's the process. You're going to be on the lookout. We're going to do a video on this real soon.
This next one's from Alan. Alan's a coach. I have a varsity catcher that cannot throw the ball back to the pitcher. Is your first step or go-to to have him throw the cutter or slider back to the pitcher? Or do you have any other suggestions on that?
Okay, I don't want to blow out elbows, but yes, it's usually the first thing I do, because what do we do with a catcher? And Bash, when you threw back to first base, what did you do? When nobody was on base, did you even like move your legs? Or did you just kind of like, they were square to the pitcher, they weren't turned, you've done it 100 times, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Then all of a sudden, if I said, hey, every time you throw back, I want you to turn, step, show your backside, turn, you'd sail that ball to center field. Okay? So what I would do with them is I get them in the outfield and I have them throw. And I'm like, we're going to throw with both legs planted in the ground. We're just going to throw it back and forth. We're going to do it from 30 feet. We're going to move back to 40 feet, to 60 feet, to 80 feet. Then the next thing I do is when we get them behind the plate, as like I said, I don't care if you throw it through. I just want you to tell me you threw it with intention. Okay? Now, here's another trick. Throw to the biggest part of the body. Okay? Tell the pitchers, no facial expressions back. Don't huff and puff. I mean, pitchers can be prima donnas. So don't, whatever. Okay? Is that fair? Is that fair? Okay.
100%.
You hated that, didn't you?
Divas.
Yeah. Divas. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell them, hey, look, we're trying to support our guy right now, okay? He's the best guy behind the plate. Don't push him out to the outfield, okay? So the other thing I tell them is to throw, like, look through their chest. Don't look at their chest. Look through their Adam's apple into the outfield and let them get in the way of a good throw. That would help. And if not, just have them cut it. It'll work. Let's do two more.
All right, let's go with, let's see. Tom says, is casting the club on the downswing a form of the yips, or is it anxiety?
Okay, I'm going to defer on this one. There's some golf instructors on here that'll probably have a better answer. But and TPI's got a lot of information about casting, early releasing, and all that. But here's the deal: if you cast and you're trying to prevent it in your swing, one of the things I'd have you do is take a couple practice swings, get a feel of it, then step in. But just know that you may cast, and it's okay. You don't have to be perfect. It's not about doing the swing. Instead, it's kind of going through it, that process. It's not about prevention of casting. It's about having something that you know you can execute in your swing that allows it to get better.
This is one from Bonin, I believe is this individual's name. What would be the best way to get over the mental barrier of bad tee shots, i.e. stepping up to a shot where you don't feel comfortable? He's a college golfer.
Okay. Great question. We're going to end on this one. What happens is a player comes up on the tee box, and for some reason, sometimes designers create mental hurdles that you don't really realize. Like the box is shifted a little bit, or it's pointing you right into some danger. And you have to look for those cues if you feel uncomfortable. If it's one of those that you love, who cares, right? Just get up, pick a target, and let it rip. There's other times where all of a sudden the stress and the trauma that you've got is built up through that. So one of the things I do is I go ahead and acknowledge that I don't like this tee shot. Don't like it. And unless there's an alternative that you do love, like, hey, I can hit 3-wood. I love this shot. That's fine. If it's like you want to hit a driver and you're afraid of the what if, okay, here's the deal. You have to ask yourself, if you have to re-tee, do you want to re-tee out of regret or frustration? Disappointment. I'd rather do it out of disappointment. So I'm going to go through my target and say, you know what? What's the worst that happens? I have to re-tee. I don't want that to happen, but I'd rather hit a great drive at that target and cut it off of that tree back there. Take a deep breath. Let some of the tension out. Don't try to swing it smooth. Don't get caught up in mechanicals other than the key that you use all the time. And step up to it and go for it. If you're going to jump off a diving board, don't jump and try to turn and catch the board. Jump, or you're going to get yourself hurt. So do the same thing on a tee box. Step in, take a deep breath, and see your line and say, you know what? Let's go for it. Challenge yourself. Don't look at it as a risk reward, like all or nothing, bad or ugly. Challenge yourself to be in that situation and go for it. Thank you for your questions. This is what makes this show great. Gonna keep asking and answering more and more questions as we go along. When we come back, we're going to finish us up and we're going to send us off to the next one. See, I knew John was right on this. And I didn't want to say anything. The cast off is often a fix for something else. You're trying to protect like an open club face or something like that. So that's why we work with an instructor, so they understand the whys so that it executes. Tonight's great about the yips. We're just getting started on dealing with Bob. Bob is so prevalent out there that I actually have some tour players who have a little keychain on their bag so that when that negative thought process rolls in, they look at Bob and they can laugh. See? You think nobody else has any issues, but every player does. Every player I've ever worked with has fear, doubts, and anxieties and stresses. If you didn't, you wouldn't be competing. Make sure you subscribe. Hit smash on my YouTube. I need this. I need people to understand how we can bring this more and more. Your questions mean the world to me. You're following, and we're going to be back. When's our next episode, Bash? Is it next week on Monday night?
Next Thursday. No, next Thursday.
Next what?
Right there.
Next Thursday?
Yeah.
Next Thursday, 7 p.m. Central Time. That's 10 days from now. It's going to be having some college basketball, but that's okay. March Madness. And if you got ideas and thoughts, make sure you hit us up and we'll touch base. Make sure you follow me on social media to know what we're talking about. And we're going to get after it. March 23rd, 7 p.m., our next Middle Game Live. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.